And welcome back to an episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're your hosts, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. A little over 4 weeks away from the beginning of Jets training camp. And surprisingly, Michael, even though we're in the dead of the offseason, there's actually quite a bit of news to talk about. First and foremost, the Jets finally agreeing to a deal with Morgan Moses, and a deal that I think you and I were expecting a lot higher for him. I think you and I both predicted 6-7 million. He ends up signing for a lot less than that. What's your reaction to the deal and another great value signing from Joe Douglas?
Yeah, I think the number is the most interesting aspect of signing Morgan Moses. I figured he would get a lot more considering the numbers that he put up last season, his durability over the past 6 years. I thought he would definitely get a lot more, but this number makes things pretty interesting, I think. It still seems like he is going to slide in as that starting right tackle, but at this number, I'm not sure it's as much of a guarantee as I thought it would be because that's pretty low. That's around the same number that Greg Van Roten is getting, Dan Feeney is getting. So it's nothing remarkable, but there are playing time incentives. So it does seem like they have plans for him to have a chance to hit those incentives. So we'll see what happens, but it does seem like what's most likely is that he slides in as that right tackle. Fant becomes your backup swing tackle, which is going to look weird on the cap sheet that you have Moses starting and Fant, who is going to be the sixth highest paid right tackle in the league this year at $9.8 million in terms of his cap hit. Have him as your backup, but it does seem like that's the route they're going to go. Or they could just have them compete throughout this offseason. Maybe they have a fair competition because $3.6 million to throw away on a competition on a 1-year deal isn't the worst thing in the world. So it'll be interesting to see how they divvy it up with these two guys. Do they consider Moses at right guard like I've kind of been campaigning for? And so they can leave George Fant at right tackle. It will be a very intriguing thing to watch play out, but it's absolutely a positive thing, without a doubt.
Yeah, and if I'm gonna be completely honest, the first thing that popped in my head, and this is gonna seem completely unrelated, but let me explain because we talked a little bit about this last week. When that deal was announced that the Jets got Morgan Moses for such a cheap price, it was just another example of Joe Douglas being a ninja, getting players well below market value, which we definitely aren't used to with the Jets. But what it made me think of is, damn, Robert Saleh must really love Jared Davis because he's the only player I can really think of that I think Joe Douglas has, overpaid, or at least, the consensus would be that he got well paid well above market value. Every other signing has been either right at market value or below. So the fact that they went above for Jared Davis, even though he's, a free agent that I think you have some questions on, a lot of people do, makes me think, okay, he was definitely a high priority. He was the first one they signed. Robert Saleh must see something in him. But as far as Morgan Moses goes, yeah, I'm excited. I mean, the Jets are doing literally everything they didn't do for Sam Darnold. It's just a shame that was the timing of things for Darnold, but what a job Joe Douglas has done this offseason, giving Zach Wilson a chance to succeed. It doesn't mean the Jets are going to win the Super Bowl or hell even make the playoffs, but they should be a competitive team this year. And it all starts up front. They've done a really good job of keeping him upright and getting a running game going. It's not the 2009 Jets offensive line, but it's probably the best line they've had since then. And that blueprint of smash mouth football, play good defense, and protect your rookie quarterback seems like what the Jets are going to try to implement, hopefully with a little bit more success through the air, especially with the weapons they've acquired. Before we get to a mailbag, there's one topic that I just didn't get asked and I think we should address because there's a little over 2 weeks away until the deadline to extend Marcus Maye. July 15th at 4 p.m., that's when you have to extend any players playing on the franchise tag, or else they're going to play the 2021 season on that franchise tag deal. And Michael, I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. I mean, how do you feel about extending Marcus Maye? Because on the surface, I think a lot of fans are in favor of this. Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh both said it's a priority. But at the same time, he is 28. He doesn't necessarily play a premium position. But then there's also the factor of what he brings in the locker room and what an extension for a veteran player, especially a veteran leader and a guy I expect to be a captain this year, may show the rest of the locker room. So how do you feel about the whole Marcus Maye situation with a little over 2 weeks to go?
Yeah, I think I'm definitely strongly in favor of extending him because both the on and off field implications, I think, like you mentioned. We saw a clip, I believe it was a bonus clip from Jeff Ulbrich from Flight 2021, in which he talked about one of the things that stood out the most about Marcus Maye was not only what he does on the field, but the fact that when Ulbrich walked in the building and talked to people about Maye, just the reputation he has is very positive. A lot of people speak highly of him. So that's really important, I think, as the Jets try to establish a culture like this. And obviously, you don't pay guys just for the sake of that, pay guys to the extent that Maye's going to get paid just for the sake of that quality. But it's not like he's an average player who's a good leader. He was elite last season. And I think Maye is the kind of player who, in a very CJ Mosley type of way, makes an elite impact in a style that isn't all that flashy. He had his share of great plays last season, highlight reel plays, but for the most part, I think what makes Maye really good is the fact that he just doesn't botch that many plays. He doesn't make a ton of mistakes, and that's what's really important when you're playing safety in the NFL. He doesn't miss a ton of tackles. He doesn't blow a lot of coverage responsibilities. He does his job, and the big plays come because he does his job. But for the most part, I think he's a star player because he executes his role and just does not get beat as much as most other safeties in the NFL do. So I think he is a star player. He's versatile. I do think he is better as a deep safety, playing single high or cover two than he is as a strong safety playing in the box, manning up against tight ends. But he's not bad in that role. He is pretty good. So he does offer great versatility as well. I think he's exactly the type of player who's deserving of an extension. And you also want to establish that mindset to your team that if you perform, if you're a good citizen in the locker room, you're going to get rewarded. And that's exactly what Robert Saleh talked about in his opening press conference, wanting to get these guys paid. And you're kind of, even though they didn't draft Maye and haven't been here for his tenure, it kind of wouldn't be living up to that to be frugal with him. So I think extending him really does line up with some of the values that they've established. But with the clock ticking, I do wonder if it is going to happen or if they are going to play hardball. I kind of feel like it won't just because of how long it's taken and the fact that he has been showing up anyway. But I'm definitely in favor of extending him, not to whatever price it takes, but he's deserving of a very handsome deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of re-signing him as well. I do think there are some reasons why it might not get done. As I mentioned, he is 28. Next year he's going to be 29. So it's like, how long of a deal are you giving him? I think 3 years is probably fair. And yeah, it's like he's playing in a new system, so you don't necessarily know how he's going to fare. Although his skill set should presumably translate, like you said. You prefer him as a deep safety, and in this cover two system, a lot of times Robert Saleh will have both safeties playing deep. He does have that versatility to play down in the box, but like you said, I think he's better in that free safety role. I agree that I think the biggest thing is sending a message that if you perform, you're going to get taken care of. I do think it'll get done. I think a lot of this is just negotiating. We know Joe Saleh. There we go. Joe Douglas is going to draw his line in the sand, and he's not going to really budge on it. And I think Marcus Maye's agent is trying to get him the best deal possible. I think it's going to get done right at the deadline. As far as how much you would pay him, it seems like the most comparable deal was the one that John Johnson signed with Cleveland over the offseason. Which I think was for like $11 million or something a year, which was like a 3-year deal. I think that makes a lot of sense. But the other thing to keep in mind is the longer the Jets wait, if a guy like Jamal Adams gets extended this summer, that number is just going to keep going up. I think Marcus Maye probably wants to top John Johnson. And the longer you wait, more safeties are going to get paid, especially his former partner in crime and Jamal Adams. I'm not saying that he's necessarily on Adams' level, but if Adams makes $18 million a year, hell, even if he gets $20 million a year, Marcus Maye is going to look around and be like, hey, I want more than $11 million a year. I want $14 million a year. I want $15 million a year. So I think the magic number is going to be somewhere around 12 and a half, 13 million. I think that's where it's going to get done for the Jets. Where do you think they ultimately, if they do get a deal done, or I guess I'll rephrase the question. What would you offer as Joe Douglas? What would be your ceiling that you would offer before the deadline, before you just say, all right, screw it. We're just going to play him on the franchise tag this year?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. That's probably a good range to put it in, probably in that 12, 13 range. If you look at the top safeties in the league in terms of average value per year, there's a little bit of a gap. You have the top 5 in which Justin Simmons is number 1 at 15.3, then Budda Baker, Eddie Jackson, Kevin Byard, Landon Collins, and Tyrann Mathieu are right behind him, all between 14 and 14.8. Then at number 7, you have Devin McCourty at 11.5 and John Johnson 11.3 at number 8. So I think somewhere between those top two tiers is a fair place to slide him in, probably 12, 13. Once you're starting to touch that 14 per year, then I might get a little bit hesitant. But at the same time, that's just sort of how contracts work in the NFL. If you're a great player and you're in line for a new deal, you're kind of, if you're not setting the new record, you're going to be close to it. So I could see why Maye would feel like he deserves the same type of money as Landon Collins, Kevin Byard, even Budda Baker, Eddie Jackson. So I think I can definitely see why the negotiations have been tough, because looking at this leaderboard, there's definitely a good argument in Maye's favor that he deserves to be right up there with everybody else. But at the same time, there are legitimate questions in terms of his age. Also, he did struggle a little bit, strong safety at the beginning last year with missed tackles, things like that. Will he fit? Not will he fit, but what is his importance in this defense? Ashton Davis is there. So it's definitely, it'll be an interesting one to watch play out. But I agree with you. I'd probably try as the Jets to not get above that 12, 13 per year mark. But I think Maye's going to push for it. So we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, I think maybe with incentives they can bump that up a little bit more, but I think it should be 12 to 13 guaranteed per year for 3 years. I wouldn't go past 3 years because at that point he's going to be 31, and I just don't think it makes much sense. I guess we'll hop in the mailbag. We have a few other things to talk about, but they should just come up in the mailbag, and so we'll hop right into it. And Morgan Moses, as we mentioned at the top of the show, is the biggest topic this week. So we have 2 questions here. One from @Mikey0516 who says, "Okay. George Fant, you see the news, agent, GM, coach, whatever. They call him. What do they say? And what does he say? How does this really play out?" And then he also asked, does Fant outplay Moses in the scheme? So I guess the first part of the question is, what are the Jets saying to a guy like George Fant, who was a team captain last year? And if you read his article that literally just came out on the Jets website a few days prior to the Jets signing Morgan Moses, he's talking, I think the scheme was built for me. I'm manifesting the best year of my career. I think starting all those games last year has really helped me out. I'm feeling amazing, et cetera. He seems in a really positive mindset of being the starting right tackle in this offense and specifically this scheme. And then the Jets go and sign a capable veteran in Morgan Moses. What do you think the Jets communicate to him, and how do you think George Fant responds to this? Do you think potentially Joe Douglas looks at George Fant's contract, looks at Morgan Moses' contract and says, hey, George, maybe you could take a pay cut for us? Or do you think at that point, George Fant might feel a little disrespected?
Yeah, this has definitely got to be an awkward one for George Fant, especially because he's very much sort of how you mentioned Jared Davis as being their guy type of signing this year, because he clearly got paid the most above expectation versus anybody else they signed. So last year, that guy is George Fant. So he's Joe Douglas's guy. So it's definitely interesting that after a debut season that
doesn't bode well for Gerard Davis then.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't, because, it definitely is a hit to that, the fact that it could seem like, I'm investing in you, but if you have one,
I'll trust Robert Saleh loving a linebacker over Adam Gase loving an offensive lineman.
Yeah, that's fair. But, it's definitely got to be awkward, but I'm sure they have a plan in mind for him. I feel like this is a regime that, as odd that this is for George Fant, I feel like that they're upfront with him and sort of said, look, this is our plan for you. You're going to be our top swing tackle. We won't restructure your contract. Maybe they even say that just, to give some more comfort, be fair to him, because I guess they don't necessarily need to right now with their cap space and how fairly cheap they got Moses for. Maybe they do pitch to him that he'll have that tight end role that he played in Seattle. So I don't know, but that's got to be an interesting one to handle, right? Close to that. I guess it's not like telling a guy he's getting cut, but it's odd because George Fant is a good scheme fit for him. I think he had a good chance to succeed as a starter here. So if they are telling him he's not going to start, I'm sure that there was some awkward energy there.
Yeah, I think you're right. I actually don't think Joe Douglas goes for a pay cut here, because I think it cushions the blow to say, look, George, you're still going to end up playing in all of our games for the most part. And hell, you'll probably start quite a few as well. Just with the injury situation, we don't know how durable Becton's going to be. Hopefully he just plays every single game. Going to the second part of the question, maybe Morgan Moses struggles a little bit in this system. He did only get $3.5 million, and he was just cut from the Washington football team. And last year was kind of his coming out party. Before that, Moses was a an average veteran, I guess I would say. And if Moses struggles a little bit in the outside wide zone system, with the athleticism that's required to play the tackle spot, maybe Fant does end up playing more. I guess, how do you feel? You've been a big proponent, and I guess we'll hop into the second question that was submitted from @C26_big, which said, any chance Moses plays right guard? He didn't sign for a high cap number. Fant is getting paid double. And you've been on this bandwagon for a while that Morgan Moses is going to be here or should be here as a right guard. Damian Woody came out and said there's no way that happens. But then when you look at the contract he signed, because does kind of line up with more guard numbers than tackle numbers. I guess, how do you see it? Maybe it's just a lack of information, but I will say all the people that are reporting it, we're saying, the Jets got their right tackle. So I don't know if that's necessarily a report that he's going to play right tackle as much as it's just a presumption. But just how do you see the Fant Moses dynamic playing out in training camp as far as their scheme fits?
Yeah, I think the possibility of a competition is still there. Like you mentioned, the fact that most of the reporters that were putting it out there were kind of saying, like, Jets got their right tackle. That's pretty telling, but at the same time, they could just be saying that and not really have any information to base it off of. They're just kind of assuming it, but it's something to note. But like we said earlier, I think the number makes this really interesting. If he got $8 million guaranteed, somewhere around there, like we were projecting, I think, on one of our recent episodes, and it would be clear that I think you're sliding him right in. But at this number, there's no harm in having Moses as a backup, throwing him about $4 million guaranteed for this year, just for him to be backup. You can be okay with that. So I think that the competition idea is still in play. The right guard idea is still in play. I wouldn't rule out any of that just yet. So we'll see what happens in training camp, perhaps, that they pitch to Fant that this is just to push him from a competition standpoint. So we'll see what happens. But in terms of the skill sets, I really do think the Moses at right guard and Fant at right tackle idea is the best one, because I think Moses can play guard really effectively, and I don't think Fant can play guard effectively, but it will be interesting to see what they do, because I think Moses at guard, his size, his power, his ability to, because I think in pass protection, he's at his best against bull rushes, inside moves, stuff he would see a lot against defensive tackles, and he struggles more against the speedier, faster guys who can beat him around the edge with a rip move, a cross chop, or just straight up speed, bend the corner. That's what he struggles with. So I think he could project well to the inside. Whereas Fant's athleticism on the edge is a really good fit. And it's not that Moses can't do that. He does have some really good kick out blocks on the move on the edge. He can do it in spite of his poor athletic numbers and overall reputation. But I do think he's better with some of the responsibilities he would have as a guard. So that's my take on it, but we'll see if it does play out that way.
Yeah, the simple way to look at it is right now you would probably say, just on paper, Morgan Moses is the better right tackle than George Fant. But when you factor in the scheme fit and projection-wise, it does kind of seem like, hey, maybe Moses would project more favorably to guard and Fant more favorably to tackle, especially in this scheme. Definitely think to keep an eye out for. I do think that he'll get some reps at guard in training camp. I think that the plan right now is probably to try to play him a tackle, but I wouldn't doubt that he does kind of move around a little bit in training camp. Because like you said, I mean, he is only getting paid $3.5 million, and Fant is getting paid, I believe it's $7 million this year, $8 million this year.
9.8 is his
9.8 million. Yeah,
yes.
$9.8 million this year, which, he probably should get a pay cut, especially if Crowder took a pay cut. Yeah, I mean, Moses' numbers.
I think that's another interesting point, Crowder, in terms of the pay cut. Because we talked about sending a message backing up what you pitched to your players in terms of helping them. I think back-to-back but having back-to-back restructures might not be the best message to the locker room. It kind of gives off a little bit of a cheap mindset. Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah, obviously it pays to be stingy and not, be constantly overpaying free agents like Mike McCagnon was. But yeah, you don't want to develop a reputation in your locker room as being, cheap and greedy. I think it's a good thing to have a line in the sand and, not necessarily always go over it. But yeah, a guy like George Fant, who you just signed somebody to most likely replace him, I don't think you need to get recuperate $2 or $3 million and try to,
who you can get rid of next year pretty easily anyway.
Right, exactly. Just take, and especially since the Jets, I believe, are still second in the league in cap space. I think it does pay to reward your players and not always have to fight for every single penny. But it is interesting to note on Moses that, he's barely making more than Greg Van Roten or Alex Lewis, who are both guards and potentially backup guards. Depending on where they play Moses. I think that guard, the more we talk about it, especially when you look at the numbers, the guard possibility really is there. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I would still say I would expect him to play right tackle, but I wouldn't be completely shocked. If Moses does play right tackle, who do you think is the favorite to win that right guard spot?
That's a tough one. I would probably give Fant the edge just because of the cap number. I think the implications of Joe Douglas kind of sending the message with what he paid Fant, that he really believes in his film and his upside. And the scheme fit. So I would probably if it's an open competition, I'm going to take Fant. But we'll see if the Moses edition is that, or if we don't think Fant played that great last year. We want a surefire upgrade. Let's grab this guy.
So you're saying you think Fant would play at guard?
I'm saying that. I thought you said.
Okay. No. I said if Moses. No. Okay. Well, that's another question, but which is actually a surprising answer. So I do kind of want to follow up on that. But the original question was, if Moses is handed the right tackle spot, who do you think wins that right guard spot?
Yeah. Okay. I think it would. I think Greg Van Roten's going to start a right guard. I would love to say
any hope
Cameron
for Cam?
Clark,
Yeah. Any hope for Cam Clark?
We just haven't gotten any reason to be hopeful yet. Although it's hard for an O-lineman to stand out in OTAs or mini camp. We'll see what he does in camp and preseason. Hopefully he balls out in preseason and can make that claim. But I'm going to stick with Greg Van Roten. I think he did a decent job last year. I think Dan Feeney will be in that mix, although I think he just ends up as the backup center, or really just backup interior O-lineman. He could play guard or tackle. But I'm going to go with Greg Van Roten right now.
I think out of all those guys, Van Roten on paper is the best scheme fit, outside of, I guess, maybe Moses, just because he's played in that wide zone offense before. But yeah, I'm really hoping Cam Clark can maybe make a push for it. You have to remember, he's a 4th-round pick, so it's not like he was a complete late round just afterthought. He was a guy that the Jets in many ways prioritized, and Joe Douglas has spoken very highly of. So I'm hoping he can make some sort of impact. The other thing is, if the Jets do keep Moses, and this is kind of bleed into our next question, if the Jets do keep Moses at right tackle and they play on Van Roten or whoever at right guard, you've talked about, obviously Fant is a terrific swing tackle. He's pretty much everything you'd look for in a swing tackle in this offense. You talked about maybe using him in that tight end role that Seattle used, which is a bit ridiculous, but I do think, and I guess I'll bleed right into this question from @DTSN Jets Dan. I don't think people are concerned enough with the tight end position. If Herndon falters, we have nothing but injury-prone tight end 2s and undrafted free agents at depth. Could you see JD making a big move at tight end via trade somehow to address it if training camp shows out badly for the tight end group? Going off that, I do think that this tight end room is not very strong. It's probably the weakest position on the whole offense, unless you're counting backup quarterback. I like Herndon, but obviously last year was a bit of a letdown. If the Jets are going to run their 2 tight end sets, obviously it sounds like Wesco is going to be more the fullback. I guess they have Croft, but if one of them goes down and they're looking to be in that 12 personnel offense, does kind of make sense to just have your swing tackle out there as a faux tight end in George Fant, especially has the athleticism and he's done it. I guess talk about or at least how do you feel George Fant can, or a good swing tackle can address kind of your issues at tight end, especially the blocking depth there. And then do you think Joe Douglas could make a move in free agency, or whether it be a trade or signing somebody right before the season to fill out that tight end position?
Well, I think in terms of Fant at tight end, we are using the term tight end to describe what he did, but it's really not that. He's just sort of a 6th offensive lineman because he's not involved in catching passes. Obviously, there was that one famous pass that he caught.
Hey, he had a few.
Where he got tackled by the turf monster, but that's why he's not catching passes. But he played about 15 snaps a game in that role from 2018 to 19 for the Seahawks in games where he wasn't starting on the offensive line. He had one game where he played 41 snaps just rotating in as a 6th lineman against the Vikings in 2019. So he was on the field a lot, and they really trusted him in that role over in Seattle. And he did a pretty good job. You could really see his athleticism on the front side of outside zone runs when he was playing that role. Sometimes they would even just throw him in at left or right tackle, and they would kick out the starting tackle to tight end. So they used him in a lot of unique ways as a blocker in that role. You're not giving him the football, but as a blocker, he can do a lot of stuff. And that's a hole that he can plug on this unit because the blocking on this group isn't great. Tyler Croft, good blocker. He helps them in this area for sure. But beyond that, Chris Herndon, good pass protector. He's very good at that. He pass blocked more than any other tight end in the league last year. And I know Gase got some criticism for that, but I think it's for good reason because Chris Herndon is a pretty good pass protector. He was as a rookie, and he was again this past year. But run blocking, Chris Herndon isn't awesome in that area. I don't think he's awful, but he knows where to be as a run blocker. He can get there, but he doesn't move people as a run blocker really at all. So I think in the run game, George Fant can definitely fill some holes there. And also the other guys, Brian Griffin, not a good blocker. Daniel Brown, not a good blocker. And you have Wesco, who, like you said, will be playing tight end, fullback. But I do think George Fant can sort of help fill some of the run blocking deficiencies on this unit.
Yeah, I think you made a good qualification there. That because the question, I guess, is more about because the Jets have such a weakness at that tight end spot, and I guess I shouldn't say such a weakness, just we don't really know what Chris Herndon is. Like you mentioned, Tyler Croft is good, but he's not a starter, but he might start for this team anyways. I think you can quell some of those issues at blocking tight end in your tight end depth by having a really good swing tackle, because when you would sometimes go to 12 personnel and have a tight end blocking, you could just, instead of doing two tight ends, have one tight end and then put George Fant out there. So I think the value of a swing tackle actually really does help this unit. If they want to get to, Shanahan loves his, pro personnel or his big jumbo personnel run blocking formations. And I think you're going to see the Jets go with six offensive linemen a lot. If Moses is playing right tackle and Fant is the swing tackle, I think he'll still get in the field plenty of times. For Matt, AKA whatever, one, how does the tight end room shake out and what are reasonable expectations for this year, numbers wise? I have to be honest, I've been very optimistic about a lot of things in this team. And Chris Herndon is one of them that I still do believe in, but I think what you learn every offseason is that not everything's going to go your way, clearly. A lot of things aren't, probably more so than you're expecting, especially if you look at the podcast we were doing last year. I don't think either of us thought that they were going to be as bad as they ultimately were. So something has to not go the Jets' way, and Chris Herndon would make a lot of sense. But I will say he did have a nice stretch at the end of the season. I love what he did in 2018. He showed a lot of promise. This is a terrific offense for him. He certainly has the opportunity to shine. I think the offense as a whole is better. He's under new coaching staff. So whatever mental funk he was in, I mean, there's certainly potential for him to kind of get out of this rut. And of course he was invited to George Kittle's tight end U. So were 48 other tight ends though. So I don't know how special of an honor that is, but maybe he'll pick up something there. And like you said, he's a good pass blocker. So I do think he'll ultimately be the starter, even though there were some rumblings that maybe Croft had overtaken him in minicamp. Michael, what do you expect from Chris Herndon this year and the tight end room from a whole?
I think that if we're going to be pragmatic and not be super optimistic about everything, then tight end is the position we probably have to look at and say, I think things aren't going to pan out great there. That doesn't mean there's no chance it'll pan out. Chris Herndon, loved the guy after 2018. I thought he had top 10 potential. So there's no reason to think that he doesn't still have somewhat of a possibility to fulfill that. Kenny Yeboah, interesting receiving prospect. I like Tyler Croft and what Tyler Croft and Trevon Wesco can do as blockers. This group has potential, but if we're being completely honest, this is probably one of the worst tight end groups in the league on paper. So, and the Jets have so much talent at wide receiver that I think they're probably going to continue to rely on this position very little in the passing game with good reason, because of how much talent they have at the wide receiver position. But I think this group's productivity is going to come down a lot more to blocking for that reason, because they're not going to be targeted all that much, because I think it's going to be really wide receiver heavy. As long as they can run block effectively, pass block effectively, I think it can be a unit that gets the job done. And I think they can do that. I'm starting to steer optimistic now. Here we go with the optimism. I started this off by saying this is going to be the one position I'm going to be pessimistic about. And now I'm
It's
slowly
hard.
convincing myself. So I'm going to take the name of the podcast here. I'm going to cool my jets a little bit. In terms of
Hey,
receiving, I think this group is going to do pretty much nothing. I think even with Herndon there, I don't think we're going to see much in the passing game with this group, even with Herndon. But I do think if Herndon continues to pass block well, if Tyler Croft can run block well, like he has the past few years, and maybe you throw Fant in there and what he can do as essentially a tight end, then I think this group can really get the job done in terms of blocking and make a positive impact in that way. But I'm gonna try and stay away from buying into Chris Herndon after drafting him in fantasy the last 2 years.
oh, that's tough. Yeah,
A
you should
little bit
have.
of a personal vendetta
Yeah,
there.
I was about to say you should have a little bit more hatred towards him. I guess I would just say, yeah, I agree with you. I think that if you're looking at things objectively, the tight end spot is the weakest spot on this offense. There's potential for Chris Herndon to really come through and be that tight end we thought he was going to be. And look, he did do a lot better towards the end of the season. He had some pretty crazy touchdown catches that he doesn't really get any credit for. But even though statistically it was worse than his rookie year, it wasn't. His rookie year was good for a rookie, but maybe that's all he is. Maybe that was Chris Herndon, really hitting his ceiling, which is, I guess, hard to say in a Jeremy Bates offense with Sam Darnold as his quarterback. But I guess it's like Chris Herndon has been very overhyped by Jets fans for that 2018 season, which was a legitimately great rookie tight end season. But he hasn't shown anything past that. He was obviously injured last year, 2 years ago, and then last year he was just mentally in a funk. I guess the one thing that gives me hope is that apparently he was dominating training camp last year, if that counts for anything. I know the Jets DBs weren't necessarily amazing last year, but I think there's potential there for him, but whether or not he'll reach it, I don't know. I'm not going to count on him reaching it, but this is the offense for him to do it. I think Tyler Croft is going to be the steady, consistent guy in this unit. I think he's the one guy that's like, I could ultimately see him starting by the end of the year just for what he brings as a blocker. But if you're going to have one position on this unit that isn't really that good, tight end would be the one. I mean, the Jets almost made the playoffs in 2015 with Kellen Davis starting at tight end. So, if Tyler Croft can bring anything as a run blocker, if Chris Herndon brings anything as a pass blocker, I guess we can throw Trayvon Wesco in there as a fullback. I don't expect that experiment to go amazingly well, but I think he can fulfill the role for a season. And maybe Chris Herndon can bring something in the passing game. This unit won't be a complete shit show. But as far as expectations, I think probably a similar. I would say Chris Herndon will put up better numbers than last year, but probably more similar to his rookie year where he had 500 yards and 4 TDs. I think, maybe 400 yards and 4 TDs, something around there. And then, but I wouldn't be surprised if Croft does start ultimately a lot of the games. Michael, I guess statistically, how do you see this unit shaking out?
I think I'll fall for Herndon somewhere. I think in terms of totals, he'll be close to where he was in 2020. He had 287 yards, 3 touchdowns, 31 catches, but I think he'll do it more efficiently because that was really bad efficiency. He had 5 drops, he had 2 fumbles, and putting up the numbers that he put up on 45 targets isn't good. That's less than 6.5 yards per target, which is bad. So I think he'll put up similar totals, but I think the volume is going to be lower, so he'll do it more efficiently. So let's say he gets probably instead of 45 targets, maybe only. I do think his usage is going to go down just because of the wide receiver talent, even in comparison to last year. So I guess let's just say he gets around 35, 40 targets, is a little bit more efficient, gets up to 350 in terms of yards. So somewhere around there. I think he'll have similar production, but more efficiently. Croft will probably do what he usually does, give you 100 to 200, 1 or 2 touchdowns. And then outside of that, I don't know if they're going to get much else. It's just really not an intriguing group.
Not at all.
I think a point that's important with tight end is that it's the best position to be bad at. In terms of offense or defense, it's definitely the best because it's the only position that you can really hide. Like you can use tight ends as much or as little as you want, and there's no other position in the game where you can really do that to the same extent. So if you have a great tight end, it's a huge difference maker. And if you have a tight end out there doing what Chris Herndon did last year, it's a huge killer. But it is a position that you can, if you're not talented there, you can really decrease how much you use it. So you can hide it to an extent.
especially how deep the Jets are at receiver. They don't have to use tight end as much, like you're saying. I do think that is a legitimate argument. Who do you think starts more games, Herndon or Croft?
I'm gonna go with Croft. I think
All right.
it'll be
Some
close,
negativity on this podcast for once.
I feel like it's gonna be because tight end starts are weird because they don't play every down. They don't like your starting tight end might not even start some games in terms of the credit that he gets just because he's not out there at the beginning of the game. But so I feel like it might. Let's just say I'm going to go in the middle. I think Herndon and Croft both get 8 starts, dead even.
All right, I like it. Yeah, I would say it's pretty close. I could see something similar where I think Herndon may start a little bit more towards the beginning of the season, and then Croft might take over towards the end if Herndon doesn't show up. But Herndon definitely has the ceiling and the athleticism and the potential to really, become a above average tight end. But
yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, so does Kenny Yeboah, I guess, body type wise. I mean, you're looking for athleticism at the position, and that's certainly what Chris Herndon brings. His rookie season was impressive, but, that consistency last year was pretty brutal. At Cuomo Show, finish this sentence without saying Zach Wilson. The Jets will make the playoffs if. And then
you should read it how it was. It was the Jets will make them playoffs.
Oh, the Jets will make them playoffs if. So back to our regularly scheduled, way beyond optimistic programming. I guess we're going playoff predictions here. Michael, how do the Jets make the playoffs? And you can't say Zach Wilson.
I think the best way to finish this sentence would be the first thing that came to mind for me is the Jets will make them playoffs if the pass rush is top 5. I think that is going to be. I think a dominant defense is their path to the playoffs this year. So, and I think that all starts with the pass rush. So that's what came to mind first for me.
Yeah, I was literally thinking the same thing, but on the flip side, I was going to say a top 5 offensive line. Hell, even a top 10 offensive line, because that just opens up everything for the offense.
That's a good one too.
Because I don't even have to say his name, but obviously it's going to help your rookie quarterback. But which is a massive difference, especially for your receivers and your tight ends as well. But also it's going to open up lanes for your running game, which is going to affect your passing game, which is going to keep you on the field longer, which is going to help out your defense. So a great offensive line is a really big deal, especially when you get towards November, December, when you're in those games, you're vying for playoffs, that cold weather football in New York. If you can run the football, manage the clock, keep that other quarterback off the field, protect your rookie quarterback, that's the path. That's the Jets' path to the playoffs. Just look at 2009. But I agree with you. It just starts with the trenches for the Jets. Offensive, defensive line. If they are as good as they can be, because the Jets have invested plenty of assets this past season into them, I think the Jets have maybe a shot, but it's not my expectations for them to make the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. The offensive line was definitely my second choice because I think the defense is going to lead the team, but the defense isn't going to carry them to the playoffs if this offense is terrible. This offense has to be okay. It has to be like a 20th ranked offense or better for an elite defense to carry them to the playoffs. And if they're going to do that, it's going to happen because of the O-line.
Yeah, the way I look at it is like as a fan, and I know there's probably many fans listening to this, like, hey, maybe the Jets could sneak in. There's 7 teams. It's a weaker schedule. I think there's certainly a chance, but I don't want to be irresponsible and try to predict that. I guess here's what I do think will happen, and this is all I want from the Jets this year is just be competitive. Just put us in the bubble graphics when we're in like week 14 and week 15. Even if we're at the bottom of the hunt, just make it a fun season. I don't want the season to be over by October. So if the Jets can manage to do that, which I think they will, I think they'll hover around 500 all season long, win a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game, that type of thing. If they could just kind of manage that, I'll be fine if the wheels fall off and they lose the last 2 games against Tom Brady and then Josh Allen, whatever. They don't have to make the playoffs for this to be a successful season. Just make it fun. But, the Jets certainly have the potential, more so than any other year in the past few seasons, to actually make a legitimate run. From at Marco BHOY, there we go, 1986. Hope we still add a veteran quarterback, but out with that, do you think we will add any other positions before players are cut? Cheers. Well, Mark, Michael, can you explain what this question means? Is he saying, do you think we'll add another veteran that's not a cornerback? Hope we still have a veteran quarterback, but out with that, do you think we will add any other positions before players are cut? Okay.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
it's
okay. So he's okay.
okay.
Before training camp, it took me a second there. I didn't read these beforehand. Before training camp, do you think the Jets could add anybody? I think it's possible. Michael, what about you? I mean, I wouldn't expect them to. If you're asking for a guess, I would say this is the roster the Jets are going into training camp with. I do, however, think the Jets will make some moves with some, with the 53-man roster cut down. Some guys slip through on the waiver wire. When teams are trying to get guys in their practice squad especially this season when you have 3 preseason games. Last year, the Jets didn't have that opportunity, and so they didn't make any moves, I don't believe, last year. The year before that, the Jets made plenty of moves, including Braxton Berrios and John Franklin Myers. I think you'll see a similar strategy. I think Joe Douglas likes to utilize every avenue to improve the team. So I think the roster, I think there will be more players on this team, at least 2 or 3 that aren't on it right now that'll make the 53-man roster before week 1, but I don't think it happens for training camp. But I think it happens in that cut down period. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, I don't think that there will be, outside of cornerback, which is the question here. Will they add someone at a position other than cornerback prior to cut downs near the start of the season? I don't think so. I think that the cornerback is probably still on the table, whether it's Nelson or Sherman or even someone else we're not talking about. I think that's probably still on the table. I'm leaning towards no. It seems like that they're confident in their ability to develop the young guys they have, and that's the direction they want to go. And there are a lot of reasons to think they can do that effectively, both because of the reputations of this coaching staff from Tony Oden on down, and also the fact that you have a good pass rush up front, making their jobs easier. I think they believe in that, but those guys are still out there, and I think that they definitely will consider it. But if it does happen, it'll probably be really late. But outside of cornerback, and I don't think anything else will happen. Moses was a rare case where you had a good starter cut at the time in the middle of the offseason at a position of need for the team. So that's definitely something worth using the cap space to jump on. But as of right now, I don't think there's anyone else who would be in the mix outside of cornerback. But you could see another Morgan Moses-like cut at some point over the next couple of weeks.
Especially if it's at tight end.
Yeah.
Especially if it got maybe like Zach Ertz or something, if he just gets cut finally and said if they can't work out a trade. So I don't think so, but you never know. From at Joe Record, what are your realistic sack totals that players in this defense put up next year? Michael?
Well, it looks like you threw it right to Mr. Sacks Don't Matter. But
we'll lay it out. Let's go. Carl Lawson, 5 sacks last year. I guess we can do this a little bit together to save some time here. Carl Lawson, 5 sacks last year. I think that's obviously going to go up. What do you think is a fair number for him this year?
I think he'll hit 8 sacks this year. I don't. He can be a really high sack guy.
Didn't Jordan Jenkins get 10 sacks one year?
I think 8 was his peak. But Carl Lawson should be. You know what? I am going to go into double digits.
Yeah, thank you. I was about to say 8 sacks.
I watch Carl Lawson play, and I don't see a 5.5 sack guy. I see a guy who is dominating his matchups so quickly that it's hard for him to get sacks because he's instantly in the quarterback's face, so they see it and get rid of the ball right away. He played on defense where he had a higher portion of his team's pass rush production than anyone else in the league, so he had no help. He's going to have a lot more help here. I think this guy is too good to keep putting up 5 sacks a year, so I'm going to be bold. I'm going to put him at 12.
All right, I was a little higher than I was thinking because I think the guy you should look at is Nick Bosa, who played the exact same role that Carl Lawson's going to be playing this year, that Leo role in this Robert Saleh defense, Jeff Ulbrich defense, whatever you want to call it. Nick Bosa had 9 sacks his rookie year, and we forced fumble. He had a good season, obviously. He was a renowned player. He only started 14 games, which I guess is if we're assuming Carl Lawson plays all 16 games, especially playing next to Quinnen Wiliams, I think he hits 10 sacks. I would say. I think
Bosa also had 4 sacks in 3 playoff games. So overall, he had 13 in 19 games.
So he clearly caught. Yeah, I guess that's a fair point to make. He was a rookie, so he maybe caught fire more towards the end of his rookie season as he's got more reps in. Lawson's a veteran, and Lawson's a very good pass rusher, even if he doesn't have the sacks to back it up because of the situation he was in with Cincinnati last year. I don't think he's ever going to be I don't even want to say that because Shaq Barrett, if you remember, was a free agent a few years ago from Denver, and I think he only had 3 or 4 sacks, and then he goes to Tampa Bay and he puts up 18 sacks. So I don't think there's really a limit on. It's all about situation for these guys. We talked about how sacks is actually a team stat in many ways. I think he clears 10 for sure. I could see 12, Michael. I could definitely see him going 12 or 13 or something like that. I'll be safe for now. I'll try to temper my expectations and go 10. I think he eats that double digits. Now, when you look at Quinnen, interior defensive lineman, 3 tech, different situation than a guy like Carl Lawson. You'd assume Lawson would lead the team in sacks. So if you have Lawson at 12, what do you have Quinnen doing?
I think before I get to Quinnen, I think I'm going to agree with you and push Lawson down to 10. I think that's a little more realistic.
I don't think it's necessarily impossible. I do think this Jets D line is really good,
but I think it's just a better middle
especially when you look at the offensive lines the Jets are playing. I do think there's a few opportunities for him to get 2 sacks a game or something like that in a few different games. I don't think 12 is unrealistic. I'm just trying to be as even keeled as possible. I'll give him 10.
Yeah. 10 was my first instinct. Then I just kind of got wild with it. So I'll just go back to 10. But with Quinnen is another interesting one. He's another guy who you look at and think there's no reason this guy can't put up a lot more sacks than he has. Even with the 7 last year, I feel like he's better than that. Although he did it in only 13 games. So especially the way he finished the season, I feel like if he played those 3 games, he missed 2 games near the end of the season. He missed 1 earlier. But I think that he would have, if he played those final 2 games, he probably would have added another 1 or 2. So I don't know. It's interesting because you always kind of project things as if players are just going to keep trending in the same direction. Okay, he added 5 sacks this year. He's going to add another 5 sacks next year. And it doesn't always work that way. But I think Williams does have the potential to do more. I think this is right around the range he's going to be in consistently. So I'll give him 8. I think that's the number he'll be at.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Eric Armstead had 10 and DeForest Buckner had 7.5. I think 8 or 9 is fair for Quinnen. Just like Carl, I could see him going higher, but if we're going to try to be optimistic but not crazy, I think 10 for Carl Lawson, 8 for Quinnen Wiliams is fair. Now, it's interesting who we go with next because I think this is a question in its own right. Who do you think is the third pass rushing option for this team? Obviously, you have a guy in John Franklin Myers, who, friend of the podcast, who you and I both think is a really damn good football player. We're still kind of unsure where he's going to play. Is he going to be more of a rotational interior defensive lineman? Are the Jets going to try to bump him out to defensive end and start opposite Carl Lawson? That way he might get more reps. Then there's an option in Sheldon Rankins, who is a damn good football player in his own right, struggled with some injuries the last few years, but I think he's in a perfect situation in this solid defense to start next to Quinnen Wiliams, especially on third down and passing stats, and get plenty of sacks. The Jets brought in Vinny Curry, who right now seems like the presumptive starter upside of Carl Lawson. I think that's probably all the top options. There's a few other guys, Jabbar Zuniga, Lorenzo Fatukasi, Nathan Shepard. There's some good depth of this unit, but looking between Franklin Myers, Vinny Curry, and Sheldon Rankins, who do you think is the next guy? And then we'll stop the question there to lead the Jets in sacks.
Yeah, and it's just really exciting hearing you lay out all those names. How many good pass rushers this team has. It's because it feels like we talked about defensive line talent on this team as a strength for all of eternity, but it was never really in a pass rushing way. It was mostly just based on run defense, hustle,
right,
but not pass rushing.
And I left out Ronald Blair, Kyle Phillips, and Bryce Huff too, by the way.
Yeah, and now it's like these are guys who can win and create pressure, and it's really exciting how many guys they have who can do that. But I think the number 3 guy for me is definitely John Franklin Myers. Will he be number 3 in sacks? I don't know about that because he hasn't been a great sack artist so far. He only has 5 in his 2 seasons, but in terms of pressure and getting to the quarterback, he's fantastic. He was elite last season, 3rd among interior D linemen in terms of pressure rate, the percentage of his pass rush snaps where he created pressure. Only Aaron Donald and Stephon Tuitt were ahead of him. So I feel like he does have a good chance to have his sacks catch up to the pressures next season and maybe put up 6 or 7, rank third on the team. And by the way, if your third leading sack guy gets 6 or 7 sacks, then you have a ridiculous pass rush. So it would be great if that could happen. But there are a lot of candidates here. Curry could do it. I don't think Curry has a great chance because he's probably not going to play too much. He's more of a rotational guy who will play like 30-40% of the snaps. But he had 5 sacks in 2019, so that could be third most. Rankins, definitely. In terms of peak talent, Rankins is probably the third most talented defensive lineman on this team. Front seven player, defensive lineman behind Lawson and Quinnen. But can he get back to that 2017 to 18 peak, or is he just a pretty good player like he was the past couple of years? I'm going to stick with my guy, JFM, though. I think he is definitely really overdue to get a lot of big plays coming his way next year.
Yeah, I think the thing that John Franklin Myers gets over Sheldon Rankins, who I also think will have a great season. I think this is, like you said, the strength of this team. And I do think they'll have a really good pass rush. I think Franklin Myers is going to play at least first down at defensive end. I do think he's going to end up starting over Vinny Curry. At least first or second down rundowns that can play John Franklin Myers at defensive end, more in that 5-tech role, which we'll see how it works out. We know Ulbrich and Saleh like those bigger defensive ends, especially when you're sticking your base personnel. And then I think on third down, that's where you're going to like to see the Jets slide him inside. The problem is they already have Sheldon Rankins, so maybe he's not even on the field on third down. So then it's like, I guess on third downs, Vinny Curry comes in as the pass rushing specialist. What I'm trying to say here is I think by the end of the season, you're going to see John Franklin Myers getting the majority of the reps at defensive end because I think he's too talented to take off the field. And I think he may even play all 3 downs on the field. I think sometimes you might slide him inside more. The Jets might do some fun things with their personnel to try to crowd the insides. But I think John Franklin Myers is going to definitely carve himself out a nice role. I think by the midseason point, your starting lineup is going to be John Franklin Myers and Carl Lawson at defensive end and Quinnen and Sheldon Rankins at defensive tackle with Fuller and Fatukasi mixing in on run situations. But because of that, because he's going to play a lot more of that end position in my eyes, I think he's going to have a little bit more opportunities to get sacks, working against tackles, bending around the corner. Like you said, I think I see him getting maybe 5 sacks, and I think Sheldon Rankins does something similar, 4 to 5 sacks as well, which is a damn good pass rush, especially given a lot of the depth the Jets have. Maybe a lot of guys hopefully will pick up 1 to 2 sacks as well. I think this is a damn good unit for the Jets. A legitimately great unit for this team, which the Jets have not had many legitimate great units. I think that's the only unit you could say right now is a legitimate great unit. I love the offensive line, but I think they still need to prove themselves a little bit more before you can declare them legitimately great. There's still questions at right guard. We don't know how Connor McGovern, right tackle, whatever. There's a rookie there, Becton's health, etc. The defensive line doesn't have many question marks in my eyes. I think this is a really damn good unit. I think they may get hindered a little bit on their sack numbers because of the lack of corners, but I think the scheme will make up for that. And so I think they'll ultimately do pretty good there. From @AndrewGolden_17, the most underrated Jet of all time. I'll be honest, Michael, I was looking at this question for a while, and I'm struggling to think of an answer here because it's hard to quantify most underrated. There seems to be plenty of good underrated players for this team that, don't ever really get the shine that they deserve. But to say the most underrated, which means they has to be so good yet gets no recognition. I don't know which player that would necessarily represent. Who do you have an answer here? Or do you want me to go ahead?
I guess the best answers would probably be if you want to go really old school, probably like some of the historical offensive linemen from the 60s and 70s. They had some really good, and even the 80s, they had some really good offensive linemen who played for a long time and played well. Joe Fields, Dan Alexander. I'm just looking at the list right now.
Yeah, I was about to say,
I'm not gonna lie and tell you I can name these guys off the top of my head.
Winston Hill?
But yeah, Winston Hill, of course, Hall of Famer. These guys played over a decade, started most of their games, and were really good. Obviously no one talks about them, but I think that's probably the clear answer. It's not really a fun one, though.
I think I would stick with you with offensive linemen because, and I'm going to give my answer in just a second. I think there are plenty of great underrated Jets that, somebody will say something, it'll spark a memory, be like, oh, what a great Jet that was. I think like Leon Washington's a great example of a guy who is not going to get any recognition. isn't never going to be a Hall of Famer. He's actually on the Jets coaching staff, I believe. But a great example of an underrated Jet. Gave some great memories, especially returning kicks. But if you're going to go as far as talent versus recognition, I'm stuck between two guys here, two offensive linemen, more from my era, not Michael's grandpa's era. I'm going to say DeBrickashaw Ferguson. I was stuck between him and Nick Mangold. I think Mangold gets a little bit more praise.
I don't know, though. I feel like Brick gets plenty of praise from Jets fans.
Maybe, but you could also factor in league-wide recognition, and I think DeBrickashaw Ferguson is mostly known for his name than what he brought to the field. I mean, the fact that he only missed one snap, which was a last play of the season, trick play where they put Brad Smith at left tackle, and all 11 players were just fast guys. They could try to run a lateral. That was the only snap he missed. I love DeBrickashaw Ferguson. I think he was the model of consistency. And when you look at Joe Douglas in that flight 2021, you look at his desk, he has a big picture of DeBrickashaw Ferguson behind him. Former offensive lineman and Joe Douglas recognizes how good DeBrickashaw Ferguson is. Well, Michael, it's a hard question because I think to say the most underrated, are you trying to say the guy who gets no props at all? I'm trying to say the guy who gets talent versus recognition. The biggest disparity, I think it's DeBrickashaw Ferguson, who doesn't really get recognized as one of the best left tackles of 21st century. And I think he absolutely is. I think he is absolutely what you would look for in a left tackle. So do you have any other? I mean, I think offensive lineman is obviously the place to go.
I'm trying to think of recent history guys, not guys from before there was color TV. But I guess Bilal Powell's a good one, but I feel like he gets that title so often that it kind of cancels itself out, Can he actually be underrated if everyone thinks he's underrated?
No.
Tony
Richardson?
Yeah, that's a solid one.
Thomas Jones? I think Thomas Jones gets no love for what he did in 2009.
I don't know. I feel like he gets his love. This is so hard because for a player to be underrated, we have to not be thinking about him right now.
I got it. I have the ultimate answer. But he does get some good love from Jets fans, I think, now. Jericho Cottrip is going to be my answer. I think I think that's the best answer because, and especially when you look at what the Jets did, I mean, they went and replaced him with Derek Mason. They valued to sign Santonio Holmes over him. They didn't really realize what he brought, and I think he was a quintessential Jet. I think he is exactly what you'd want in a slot receiver. I mean, and look, he was the starting outside receiver for the Jets for a few years as well. I think Jericho Cottrip is probably the most underrated guy. He gets no love at all. I think he went to Pittsburgh and then Carolina. I think he played in that Super Bowl too, that Carolina-Denver Super Bowl. But Cottrip, I think, is a good answer as far as underrated Jets. Nobody talks about him, that at least I see, as far as Jets fans go. League-wide, never really gets talked about, never gets the recognition. But that play against Cleveland where he injured himself and then, still went and made a diving, amazing catch epitomizes the type of player he was. I think as far as underrated goes, I think he's a great answer as well.
All right, Jeremy Curley. That's a pretty solid one.
No, you're going too much in the unknown. Yeah, Jeremy Curley is a good player, but I think he gets an appropriate amount of recognition. Maybe even more so. I think he was okay. I don't want to.
Wow.
I like Jeremy Curley.
He scored less than 2 touchdowns per season with the Jets. All right, forget that answer.
Yeah,
you get the credit.
He did have the bit. He did have a bit of a career renaissance in 2017. Remember, he came back and wore 14, which was kind of weird. Scored that touchdown against the Patriots before Austin Seferian-Jenkins.
Still was a better number 14 than the next guy. Okay. All right, I shouldn't have said that.
Okay. Hilarious. All right, at NZ Jets, last question, then we'll get out of here. If you had,
I'm kidding, by the way.
Okay, if you had to pass rush versus Mekhi Becton, 100 reps in a row, or pass block Quinnen Wiliams 100 reps in a row, which one are you doing?
I mean,
I
think there's 2 different ways to look at it. My odds of being successful and actually doing something productive on a football field, and my odds of physical well-being. So in terms of succeeding, I think pass rushing versus Becton is probably more doable. I don't think I would ever be able to stop Quinnen Wiliams from getting past me or any of us regular people. But I think if I'm pass blocking Quinnen Wiliams, then I could just get out the way and protect myself. But if I'm rushing against Becton, I guess it doesn't really count as rushing unless I go up to him. So
I think there's a zero chance. I think there's probably a 0 chance you get by Becton. I do think that it depends on the play call.
You don't think you could do it one time out of 100?
No, I don't think so. I do think I could. Maybe. Maybe one. I do think that there's a chance you could hold Quinnen Wiliams just long enough for a pass to get. Like, that's why I said, what's the play call? Because if it's just a snap and throw, I think I can hold him back, tie him up.
But that doesn't count because then a tree could do it.
No. Okay, well, are we saying it's like a 3-second
passing drop back?
No, okay, not
4 verticals.
No, like I think 3 to 5, 3 seconds. Can I hold him for 3 seconds? I think I could do that to Quinnen a few times, maybe like 2 or 3 times. I've trained some wrestling, jiu-jitsu. I think I have some good body leverage.
Maybe you could. I don't think I could though.
I think I have some good body leverage. I have no technique though. I think I could hold on to him just long enough where a QB could maybe get it off, but I think he'd probably succeed, 98% of the time. So I think maybe I could hold him twice.
I think if you gave me 500 chances, I think I could beat Becton once.
Is there a ref? No, Michael, there's no chance you could beat a 6'7", 360 pound
one time. Man. I'm just saying one time.
It's more likely you could just stall Quinnen Wiliams for 3 seconds than you could get by Mekhi Becton, which I don't think. Personally, now that I'm saying it out loud, I think I could maybe stall Quinnen for 1 rep. Mekhi Becton, I'm not getting by once. He's so.
But you're so much smaller. It's hard for him to get his hands on it.
Put it like this. You're an analytical guy. You're an analytical guy. Okay. Let's put it this way. On a given snap between an offensive lineman and a defensive lineman, who's supposed to win the majority of the reps? The offensive lineman. Because it's a successful job or an unsuccessful day for an offensive lineman, they still win 90% of the reps, right? Yep. So Mekhi Becton should win every rep against an NFL, or not every rep. He should win most reps against an NFL defensive end, which means I think he's going to win every single rep against you and I combined. I think against Quinnen, there's at least a chance that you could tie him up for long enough. Also, is there a ref?
Yeah, I think.
Can I grab onto his shirt? Like, can I hold him?
Let's say over under hook. We need a handicap, but then they would be allowed
hit
to
him with some knees
too.
in the clinch. I don't know.
That's a really good point. I appreciate that, but I think that there's just no way.
Now you're just going to die on the hill. You're just going to die on the hill.
There's just no way Quinnen can't bull rush me every single time. I'll never have an answer. But I think Becton, once in a while, just, he misses with his hands, dip underneath him.
Yeah, and then he would just sit on you. Like, he would just push you down to the ground. Like, Michael, no chance you get. All right, tweet us at CYJPod. Do you think you have a better chance of getting by Becton or holding up Quinnen? I think out of 100 times I could maybe hold up Quinnen once, at least. I shouldn't even say it. I think I could hold him once. I don't
playing
think
tackle or guard? Or is it just like
guard.
One-on-one in the middle?
One-on-one. Yeah, you're just, quarterback just says hike or somebody just snaps it. I don't know. I think it's just a one-on-one rep like the Senior Bowl. Somebody just says go. Yeah, he's going to abuse you most times.
Yeah, this reminds me of that one tweet where it's like, I could luck into a home run, but I could never block Quinnen Wiliams on a pass rush.
I think the only chance is honestly, I don't even know. Tweet us at CYJPod your answer. I think it's a better chance that you can pass block Quinnen Wiliams or you can get by Mekhi Becton. I think Michael's crazy if you think he can get by 6'7", 370-pound Mekhi Becton, who could probably just win the whole rep with his right hand tied behind his back. All right. I think it's time to get out of here. You can follow, I already said it. You can follow us at CYJPod. You can follow Michael at Michael_Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington on Twitter. You can Jets X Factor, the best place to go for Jets content. Like, rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Can you even like on iTunes? Rate, review, subscribe on iTunes, like on YouTube, so. Whatever. We've been releasing on Thursdays. We've been doing a bonus episode each week. We're going to keep that trend going. Right now, we're just in our positional previews. Make sure to check out our linebacker one we did this past week. I thought that came out really well. Running backs was the week before. I think we'll probably go back to offense this week. I think we'll do receivers probably this week. So be on the lookout for that. And I think that's it. Michael, any last words?
I don't know. Give me 100 reps. I could get
No,
past Becton.
there's no chance. I think you're right that it's probably better for your health and well-being. I think Quinnen, you're going to take some lumps. Like your head's going to bounce off the turf a few times just by getting body slammed. I think Mekhi, you could just kind of, give a Muhammad Wilkerson 2017 type of effort and 2016 type effort and just kind of, dance around a little bit. But I think Quinnen, you have a better chance of succeeding. But yeah, if you're interested in not developing any CTE, then maybe trying to pass rush against Becton's the better move. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Everybody have a great week. Go Jets.